John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars is a sci-fi action horror film starring Natasha Henstridge, Jason Statham, Pam Grier, Clea Duvall, Ice Cube and Joanna Cassidy. The film was directed and co-written by Carpenter. Also, Carpenter in his usual fashion wrote and performed the film's score. The film was financed by Screen Gems and was later distributed by Sony Pictures Entertainment Motion Picture Group. Ghosts of Mars had a budget of $28 million but was a bomb, due to only receiving approximately half its budget of $14 million at the box office. Also, it was critically panned upon release, receiving largely negative reviews. In the years since its release, however, Ghosts of Mars, like the majority of Carpenter's films, has gained a cult following, with critics now praising the film's action sequences, its soundtrack and blending of the genres. The film is set on Mars 200 years in the future and is for the most part shown in flashbacks, where at a preliminary hearing, colony police officer Lieutenant Melanie Bollard, Henstridge, gives a testimony recounting the aftermath of a bloody battle on an isolated Mars colony. It transpires that Bollard and her team were charged with transporting dangerous convict Desolation Williams, Ice Cube, from the outpost back to civilization when they were attacked by a gang of nomads led by the vicious Big Daddy Mars. It turns out that deep excavation work in a nearby mine had disturbed and unleashed an army of warrior ghosts, spirits of Mars' original inhabitants who have possessed the miners and are now trying to reclaim the planet for themselves once more by eradicating all human life. Ghosts of Mars, like all films, has its fans, and for the most part I'm not one of them. On the whole, it lacks Carpenter's usual magic, his style and flair that to me make the majority of his films stand out, making them uniquely John Carpenter. Carpenter claimed that he'd always wanted to do a film set on Mars. That's great, but on the flip side, Carpenter doesn't seem that invested in Ghosts of Mars when compared to, well, all his previous work, even vampires. I hate to say it about the man himself, but Carpenter's direction comes across as mediocre and just going through the motions. The script is not great either by Carpenter and co-writer Larry Sulkis, and is probably the worst from such a talent as Carpenter. The story seems to be in part ripped from Carpenter's own 1976 classic Assault on Precinct 13, but set in space. This time it's done to a much lesser effect and with a much larger budget. There are other elements which appear to be taken from Carpenter's classic and fan favourite, The Thing, like Ghost's attempt at isolation and paranoia, but sadly are underwhelmingly executed. There is also a kind of reminiscence of The Fog when the red dust flows over the hills of Mars and follows a would-be victim. Maybe I'm being too picky, but it's hard not to be when these ideas remind me of what's done by Carpenter earlier and better. It is said that Carpenter made Ghosts of Mars with the intent for it not to be taken seriously, to be seen as sort of campy and over the top, with some tongue-in-cheek as well, all of which of course are great, but personally I only saw two of these elements, the tongue-in-cheek and the over-the-top action, but the campiness, I just don't see it. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Another problem the film has is that there aren't really any characters to like and care about. We are thrown into the meat grinder with them and not given any character development or even a hint of any backgrounds. When it comes to the acting, Natasha Henstridge, Pam Grier and Joanna Cassidy are better than the rest. Sadly for Clea Duvall, she is very underused. She hardly speaks for the most part and just nods when taking orders. When she does speak, it's mostly monotone. It's a shame because Duvall is better than this. Watch her in Girl Interrupted, Identity, Zodiac, and The Faculty to see examples of this. Jason Statham's character, who consistently tries to get into Bollard's joy box, is rigid as hell, but to his credit has got somewhat better over the years. Ice Cube's Hardman is a wooden, laughable stereotype that I've repeatedly seen in some of his other films. The other actors just do what's asked of them, which isn't much at all. One element that is noteworthy is the film's score with its instrumental rock metal sound mixed in with Carpenter's classic synth. As a standalone album it is a good listen and there are some superb guitar riffs in there, but as a visual aid it doesn't really gel with what's on screen. The rock metal pieces seem to be thrown in as a supposed shot of adrenaline to ramp up the excitement of what you're seeing. I mean, even though the music doesn't gel with the action, it does at most vaguely enliven it on its first outing. So when we get to the second fight scene, it has become somewhat stale, irritating and outstays its welcome very quickly. When it comes to the dialogue-driven scenes, we hear Carpenter's synth, which of course is a change in tone and style to the score. Those changes are fine, but could have helped with the film's pacing or change in mood, like tension or intrigue. They don't, sadly, because on the whole the film lacks both. To me, they are more of a welcome break to fill in for the more memorable heavier rock metal tracks before they start again, which relentlessly drown the senses during each fight scene. And once those begin, you know it's time to get up off your sofa and do some headbanging. The special makeup effects are very good. The makeup for the possessed colonists when they violate their skin, for example. Especially the makeup for Marilyn Manson inspired Big Daddy Mars. After Ghosts of Mars, Carpenter left the Hollywood scene because of too much corporate control over the films he was hired to make. He did somewhat the same after Big Trouble in Little China in 1986. The Corps weren't happy with him not making the film they wanted. He gave them a John Carpenter film, which is classed as weird by non-Carpenter fans. Personally, I wouldn't have wanted that film any other way. Besides, if Big Trouble was a success, we may not have been graced with the lower budget Prince of Darkness in 1987, and one of my non-horror favourites by Carpenter, They Live in 1988. I guess we'll never know. My final thoughts of Ghosts of Mars. I've always had many good things to say about all Carpenter's films I've reviewed. I wanted to like the film this time round. Being over 20 years and myself being almost in my late 40s, gave me the hope that my opinion might do a 180 after a fresh viewing. But sadly that's not the case with Ghosts of Mars. Not much can be said, in a positive manner anyway. The story is weak, overall the acting is not great, and Carpenter's direction is off and lacking enthusiasm. The only praise I can really give are the special makeup effects and the film score, which sad to say is better listened to on your music system. To me, the film is protected in a way because of being titled John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. If there was no connection to Carpenter, I really do believe it would have been lost into obscurity a long time ago. On the surface, it can be seen as a mildly entertaining action sci-fi flick, especially to a non-Carpenter fan who more than likely wouldn't scrutinise it. But of course for myself and probably other Carpenter enthusiasts who have done and would do so, because deep down Ghosts of Mars comes up empty on many levels. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed my retro review of John Carpenter's Ghosts of Mars. Please do tell me what you think of the film in the comments down below. I'll be doing David Cronenberg's The Fly as my next review. In the meantime though my friends, take care of yourselves and I'll catch you next time.